Let's unpack this. We are about to dive into what is, well, arguably the most consequential 9-page computer science paper written this century. It's really the blueprint for maybe the largest financial revolution since, gosh, double-entry bookkeeping.
He really is the document that laid the entire foundation.
Yeah.
But before we even open the metaphorical pages, we have to start with a question that sounds simple, but isn't. Why? Why, in an age where we can sling complex video files, instant messages, terabytes of data across the globe like that?
Instantly, yeah.
Why do we still need these massive, expensive intermediaries,
Yeah.
Banks, PayPal, credit card companies, just to send digital money?
It seems absurd when you put it like that, doesn't it? I mean, if I hand you a $20 bill right here, right now, that exchange is instant. It's final. It's non-reversible. Once the cash leaves my hand, it's done, settled. But the second we try to do that online, we lose that fundamental thing. We lose the finality and we lose the direct, peer-to-peer aspect.
And that loss is tied entirely to the inherent problem with digital value, trust, or rather the need for trust. Commerce on the internet, as it evolved, came to rely almost exclusively on financial institutions. They act as trusted third parties.
The referees.
Exactly. They are the central record keepers. They're the ones who say who owns what and when a transaction actually happened.
And the cost of having that referee, that mediation, it's profound. The white paper points this out right at the start. It forces high transaction costs, which in turn severely limits how small a transaction can realistically be. It basically cuts off the possibility for all those small, casual, peer-to-peer payments, like tipping someone online easily or microtransactions.
And maybe the worst limitation, the one Satoshi really highlights, is you lose the ability to make payments that are truly non-reversible, like cash.
Right. Once it's sent, it should be sent.
Precisely. The white paper calls this the inherent weakness of the trust-based model, because when transactions can be reversed, think chargebacks, the need for trust just spreads everywhere. Merchants suddenly have to be wary of every single customer. They have to price in the cost of fraud, deal with chargeback hassles. It's a mess.
So Satoshi Nakamoto realized the entire problem boiled down to creating a reliable peer-to-peer electronic cash system, one that works over the internet, over any communications channel, without needing that trusted third party.
And that leads us straight to the core technical challenge, the absolute linchpin Satoshi had to solve, the dreaded double spending problem.
Yes, digital counterfeiting.
That's it. And the entire elegant 9-page blueprint, the paper titled Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, is essentially the mechanism designed to solve that one. Massive headache.
It's amazing how focused it is.
It really is. And the solution isn't some brand new, impossibly complex technology. It's actually a brilliant arrangement of existing cryptographic tools, some clever networking ideas, and, crucially, game theory. It proposes a system based on cryptographic proof instead of trust.
Okay, so our mission today for everyone listening is to break down the 5 revolutionary ideas detailed in that paper. And we promise by the time we finish this deep dive, you'll understand the intricate machinery that makes this whole thing tick, even if you have zero technical background.
Let's do it.
All right, so to really get why double spending is the problem, we have to understand what digital money or a digital coin actually is. At its core, it's just information, right?
Exactly. And information is fundamentally, trivially easy to copy. That's the crux of it.
Okay, so the white paper starts with the definition. It says an electronic coin is defined as a chain of digital signatures. Can you unpack that a bit?
Sure. It sounds fairly straightforward. Imagine I have this digital coin. When I want to transfer it to you, I digitally sign a hash, think of a hash, as a unique digital fingerprint of the previous transaction where I received the coin, and I also include your public key, your digital address, essentially.
Okay.
Then I just broadcast that signed message, those signatures out to the network.
So when I receive this payment from you, I can look at the coin's history, I can see this chain of signatures, right? And I can verify that every previous owner, going all the way back, had the cryptographic authority, the right key, to pass it along to the next person, eventually ending with you sending it to me. It confirms the ownership trail.
It confirms the chain of ownership leading up to the transaction you just received. Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. But, and this is the existential flaw of purely digital cash without a central system. You can't verify just from that signature chain that the person who sent it to you didn't also sign an earlier transaction sending that exact same coin to someone else, maybe 5 minutes before.
The double spend.
That's the double spend.
Right. This is the classic digital counterfeiting analogy everyone uses. If I email you a digital photo, I don't lose the original file from my computer. I'm just sending you a perfect copy. If digital money was just a file I could transfer, I could copy-paste it a million times and spend it everywhere simultaneously.
You got it. You, the payee, can verify the signature that proves the sender owned the money at some point. But you cannot verify the absence of an earlier conflicting transaction. How could you possibly know what they did before?
And because of that fundamental vulnerability, that inability to prove a negative, centralization seemed mandatory. It was the only way.
Historically, yes. The common solution was the trusted central authority. You call it a mint or just bank server. This central entity checks every single incoming transaction against its master ledger to make sure the funds haven't already been spent.
Okay, so the mint sees my transaction, checks its books, sees the money is available, marks it as spent, and then credits the recipient.
Sort of. Yeah. Effectively, once the transaction clears, the digital coin is, in a way, returned to the mint, which then issues a new unspent coin or updates the balance for the recipient. It manages the state.
But wait, the moment you bring back that central mint, you've reintroduced the very thing we were trying to get rid of. The need for trust, the single point of failure, the mediation costs, all those systemic weaknesses we started talking about. The fate of the entire system rests on that one company running the mint.
Precisely. And this is where Satoshi's insight was just phenomenal. He or she or they realized that to solve double spending without trust, the pay needs irrefutable proof. Proof that at the time of their transaction, the vast majority of the network agreed it was a first received transaction for those specific funds.
Okay. So we don't necessarily care about later attempts to spend the same money. If someone tries to double spend after my transaction is confirmed, those later attempts are just invalid.
That's the idea. Only the earliest one counts. But think about what that requires. To confirm that there wasn't an earlier valid transaction, essentially confirming the absence of something.
You need total awareness. You'd have to know about all the transactions happening everywhere in the system.
Exactly right. And not just know about them, but agree on their order. The system needs a way for all participants, the entire network, to reach consensus on a single, unified, irrefutable history. They need a shared memory of the chronological order in which every single transaction was first seen.
A shared memory that nobody owns, and crucially, nobody can unilaterally rewrite.
That's the goal. That's the mountain Satoshi set out to climb.
Okay, so if we can't trust a single centralized mint or bank to keep the official history book, the only real alternative is to decentralize it. We have to make the history public, distribute it among all the participants.
That's step one. And it brings us to the first really revolutionary component proposed in the white paper, using a peer-to-peer network combined with a public ledger.
Makes sense. The paper argues that if you still need that central referee, you've basically lost the main benefit of direct peer-to-peer payments anyway. So the network itself has to become the arbiter of truth.
It has to. And the mechanism is public announcement. Transactions aren't sent secretly to a bank. They are broadcast out for everyone on the network to see.
Okay, let's talk about that public ledger concept. The analogy often used is the magic notebook, right?
It's a decent starting point, yeah. Imagine a notebook where every single transaction that ever happens gets written down. And crucially, everyone in the world who wants one can get a perfect, constantly updating copy of this notebook.
So when I want to send you money, I don't tell a bank. I just sort of shout it out, write it down in the public notebook for everyone to see.
That's the basic idea. This public announcement, shared across this network of computers, we call them nodes, forms a distributed ledger. Everyone sees the same history develop over time. It eliminates the need for that central bank or mint to track history because everyone is tracking it together.
Okay, the public nature is critical. But let's get a bit more specific about what this ledger is actually tracking. You mentioned earlier that a coin is a chain of digital signatures. Is the ledger just a list of those chains?
That definition is conceptually helpful, but the actual implementation, the way Bitcoin works under the hood, is a bit more nuanced. It's quite clever, actually. Bitcoin doesn't track accounts or balances in the way a bank does. A bank uses an account-based model.
Right. A bank ledger says, host speaker has $100 in their account. Bitcoin doesn't do that.
Yep. Instead, the Bitcoin ledger tracks the flow of value through history using something called unspent transaction outputs, or UTXOs.
UTXOs. Okay, what are those?
Think of it like this. When someone sends you Bitcoin, that transaction creates an output, a chunk of value locked to your public key address. That output is now sitting on the ledger, marked as unspent. It's available for you to spend later.
So it's like receiving specific digital coins or notes rather than just having a balance increase?
That's a great way to think about it, like receiving specific bills in your wallet. When you want to send, say, $50 worth of Bitcoin, the transaction you create has to specifically point to one or more of those unspent outputs, UTXOs, that you previously received, and that had up to at least $50.
Yeah, I see. So the money isn't just this abstract balance. It's intrinsically tied to a specific historical event, the transaction where I received it. It's like saying, I'm spending the $20 bill I got yesterday.
Exactly. You're consuming specific previous transaction outputs as inputs to your new transaction. And this ties directly back to the role of digital signatures.
How so?
The digital signature provides what the paper calls strong control of ownership. When you create that transaction spending your UTXO, you use your unique private key to sign the transaction. This mathematically proves that you are the owner of the public key address associated with that specific UTXO.
So the signature proves who is authorized to spend it.
Right. But it's the public announcement combined with the UTXO model and the shared ledger that confirms that the money actually exists. It's a valid UTXO. And, crucially, that it hasn't already been spent in another transaction that the network has seen.
Okay. So the core idea here, the big shift, is moving away from trusting the identity of some central third party.
And instead relying on computational proof, the digital signatures proving ownership, and the universal visibility of transaction history, the public ledger tracking UTXOs. We trust the math and the open record, not some intermediary hiding behind closed doors.
A system where any two willing parties can transact directly. That was the goal.
And this public ledger is the first piece of making that possible. But it immediately raises the next big question. So this public transaction-centric ledger using UTXOs. Step one. But we run headfirst into the second, equally serious problem, if everyone had a copy of this magic notebook.
What stops someone from just cheating? Going into their own copy of the notebook, maybe erasing a payment they made last week, and then just broadcasting their edited fraudulent version of history to everyone else, saying, hey, look, my version is right.
Exactly. How do you prevent digital revisionism? How do you enforce the integrity of the past in a system where, by design, no single person is in charge of patrolling the record?
This seems like a huge hurdle.
It is. And this is the point where the white paper introduces the absolute heart of Bitcoin's security mechanism, the concept of a distributed timestamp server, and the ingenious idea of chaining blocks together using cryptography.
Okay, timestamping and chaining. Let's break that down. What's a timestamp server part?
It relies heavily on cryptography, specifically a concept called a cryptographic hash function. You mentioned hash as a digital fingerprint earlier, and that's a perfect analogy.
Right, you feed some data in, you get a unique fixed size string out.
Exactly. You take a chunk of data, in this case, a collection of verified transactions that we want to timestamp. You run it through a standard algorithm like SHA-256, and out pops this unique string of letters and numbers. It's the hash.
And the key property is it's like a one-way street, right? You can't go from the hash back to the original data. And if you change even a tiny little bit of the input data,
The resulting hash changes completely. Dramatically and unpredictably. It's incredibly sensitive. There's no way to predict how the hash will change if you alter the input, and no way to engineer an input to get a specific desired hash other than just trying random inputs over and over.
okay. So how does this hashing help with timestamping and preventing tampering?
The solution proposed in the paper starts by grouping transactions together into blocks. Think of a block as a page in our magic notebook analogy. It contains a list of recent validated transactions.
Right.
The timestamp server concept works by taking all the transactions in a proposed block, hashing them all together into one representative hash for the entire block, and then widely publishing that block hash.
Publishing it how?
By broadcasting it to the network as part of the process of adding the block to the chain, which we'll get to. But the act of calculating and publishing that hash creates a kind of timestamp. It provides immutable proof that all the data inside that block must have existed at that specific time because you needed all that data to calculate that specific hash.
Okay, but hang on. A single block can contain hundreds, sometimes thousands, of individual transactions. Hashing all of that data together sounds potentially slow or cumbersome if every node has to verify every single transaction inside every block all the time.
You've hit on a key implementation detail. The white paper doesn't explicitly name it, but the way this is efficiently handled in Bitcoin relies on a data structure called a Merkle tree.
Merkle tree. Sounds fancy.
It's actually quite elegant. Instead of just mashing all the transaction data together, you first hash each individual transaction, then you take pairs of these transaction hashes, concatenate them, and hash them together. You keep pairing and hashing up the tree.
Until you're left with just one single hash at the very top.
Exactly. That single hash at the top is called the Merkle root. It cryptographically represents and summarizes all the transactions included in that block in a very compact way.
And that Merkle root is what actually gets included in the final block header that gets hashed for the timestamping process.
Precisely. This makes verification incredibly efficient. A node can verify if a specific transaction was included in a block just by having the block header, which contains the Merkle root, and a small bit of data called a Merkle proof. They don't need to download and process every single transaction in the entire block just to verify one.
Clever. Okay, so we have blocks of transactions summarized by a Merkle root, and then the block header gets hashed to sort of seal the block. Now, the critical part, the chaining mechanism, how does that make the ledger irreversible?
This is the core innovation, the chain in blockchain. The irreversibility comes from the fact that each new block's header hash doesn't just include the Merkle root of its own transactions. It also includes the hash of the immediately preceding block.
Ah, so block 10's hash calculation depends on block 9's hash.
Yes. It creates this deterministic cryptographic link. Think back to the Magic Notebook. It's like sealing page 10 with a unique, complex wax seal.
Okay.
And then, when you go to seal page 11, you actually take a piece of the now hardened wax from page 10's seal and physically melt it into the seal for page 11.
Wow, okay. So to tamper with page 10, you'd have to break its seal first.
Right, which would destroy that little piece of wax that was embedded into page 11's seal.
Which means you'd then have to break and completely redo the seal on page 11 to match the altered page 10.
And since page 12's seal contains a piece of page 11's, you'd have to redo page 12 too, and page 13, all the way up to the most current page.
It creates a cascade. Changing anything in the past requires redoing everything that came after it.
That's exactly it. And what's really fascinating and crucial for security is how this chain linkage makes the history exponentially harder to change over time. Each new block that gets added doesn't just secure itself, it adds another layer of cryptographic reinforcement to all the blocks that came before it.
So if some attacker wanted to go back and change an old transaction, say, erase a payment they made last week, which is maybe thousands of blocks ago,
they would have to first recalculate the hash for that old block they tampered with. But because every subsequent block's hash depends on the previous one,
that single change would break the hash linkage for every single block that has been added since then. The chain would be visibly broken to everyone else on the network.
the record effectively cannot be changed.
Yeah.
It's not theoretically impossible, but it is computationally infeasible. It would require redoing the original difficult computational work, which we'll get to, for the tampered block, and redoing all the work for all the thousands of blocks that have been chained after it, all while the rest of the network continues adding new blocks to the honest chain.
So the goal of the blockchain isn't just recording history accurately.
It's making that recorded history permanent and tamper-proof by chaining it together using this clever application of cryptographic hashes. Mathematical certainty replaces the need for a trusted record keeper.
Okay, this is starting to paint a clearer picture. We have public ledger tracking transactions, UTXOs. This ledger is built page by page, block by block. And these blocks are cryptographically chained together, making past history incredibly difficult, almost impossible to revise without everyone noticing.
Right. The integrity of the past is secured by the chain.
But we still have a massive fundamental problem that the white paper absolutely had to address. Who gets to add the next page? Who decides which new block gets linked onto the end of this global shared chain?
Ah, yes. The consensus problem.
Right. How do we decide the order? And maybe more importantly, how do we stop a single person or a powerful group from just taking over, controlling which transactions get included, censoring others, maybe even trying to build their own fraudulent chain faster than everyone else?
This is where the third crucial component comes in. The concept of consensus achieved through proof of work, POW. This is the mechanism that governs the network, implements that distributed timestamp server idea we talked about, and ensures the chronological order is decided fairly and without bias.
Proof of work. This is often compared to a kind of lottery, right? But a computationally intensive one.
That's a good way to think about it. It borrows ideas from earlier concepts like Adam Back's hash cache, which used POW for preventing email spam, But Satoshi applied it here in a novel way to secure a monetary ledger.
So how does this computational lottery work in Bitcoin?
It's a competition. All the nodes on the network that want to participate in adding the next block, we call these nodes miners, they gather up the recent valid transactions that have been broadcast.
Put them into their proposed block, calculate the Merkle root.
Exactly. And then they start the race. The competition involves frantically searching for a special random number called a nonce.
A nonce.
Well, they
Okay.
take the block header data, which
Mhm.
includes the previous block's hash, the Merkle root of the new transactions, a timestamp, etc., and they add this nonce value to it. Then they hash the entire thing using SHA-256.
And what are they looking for?
They're looking for a nonce that makes the resulting hash output meet a specific condition. Specifically, the hash has to start with a certain very large number of leading 0 bits.
So it's like trying to roll a billion-sided die and hoping it comes up less than, say, 10?
Something like that, yes.
Yeah.
Because of how hash functions work, there's no shortcut. You can't predict which nonce will work. You just have to try random nonces, one after another, hashing the block header each time, billions and billions of times per second, until someone, somewhere, gets lucky and finds a nonce that produces a hash with the required number of leading zeros.
And this requires, well, it requires incredible amounts of trial and error. Brute force computation, real CPU cycles, real electricity.
Massive amounts.
Yeah.
That's the work in proof of work. Finding that winning nonce is extremely difficult and resource intensive. But, and this is key, verifying that a proposed solution is correct is incredibly easy. If a miner broadcasts a block and says, hey, I found the nonce, any other node on the network can take the block header data, add the proposed nonce, perform one single hash calculation, and instantly see if the resulting hash meets the difficulty target, starts with enough zeros. Verification is trivial.
Okay, so finding the answer is hard, checking the answer is easy. And the rule is?
The rule is simple. The first node, the first miner, to find a valid nonce that solves the puzzle for their block, gets the right, the privilege, to broadcast their newly validated block to the entire network. They've proven they did the necessary work.
And this becomes the basis for the voting system, right? This is the genius part. We can't use one person, one vote because identities are anonymous online.
Right, you could create infinite fake identities.
And we can't use one IP address, one vote because, again, an attacker could easily spoof or control thousands of IP addresses.
That's right. Powell cleverly forces the consensus mechanism to be, effectively, one CPU, one vote. Or more accurately, one unit of processing power equals one vote. The voting isn't explicit. It's demonstrated through economic activity, the expenditure of energy to find the nonce.
And how does this translate into consensus on the correct chain?
Nodes vote by choosing which block to build upon next. When a miner finds a valid block, they broadcast it. Other nodes verify it. If it's valid, they accept it and immediately try and find the next block, using the hash of the block they just received as the new previous hash. They are voting with their hashing power to extend that chain.
So the majority decision, the consensus view of history, is represented by
By the longest chain.
why?
Because the longest chain is the one that represents the greatest cumulative proof-of-work effort invested in it. It's the chain that required the most computational energy, the most electricity to build.
So if the majority of the CPU power, the hashing power, on the network is controlled by honest nodes following the rules,
Then the honest chain, the one representing the true history of valid transactions, will naturally require the most energy to extend. It will grow the fastest, on average, and always outpace any competing shorter chains that might be started by attackers trying to double spend or cheat. An attacker simply can't generate proof of work faster than the entire honest network combined, assuming they don't have the majority of power.
Okay, let's quickly run through the steps the white paper outlines for how this whole network process operates day to day. It's like a continuous cycle.
Right. Section 5 lays it out nicely. Step 1. New transactions are created, signed by their owners, and broadcast out to all available nodes across the peer-to-peer network.
Step 2. Each node, particularly the miners, collects these new, unconfirmed transactions floating around into a potential block, their block proposal. And crucially, they verify each transaction first. They check the signatures, make sure the UTXOs being spent are actually unspent according to their view of the longest chain.
Step 3. Each mining node then starts working competitively, burning CPU cycles and electricity, trying to find that difficult proof-of-work nonce for their specific block proposal.
Step 4. Eventually, one miner somewhere in the world finds a valid nonce first. They win the round. They immediately broadcast their completed, validated block proposal, including the winning nonce, to the rest of the network.
Step 5. Other nodes on the network receive this broadcasted block. They quickly perform the verification. Are all signatures valid? Are all transactions spending previously unspent UTXOs? Does the nonce produce the required hash difficulty? If everything checks out, they accept the block as the next valid page in the ledger.
And this is where the enforcement happens, right? If the winning miner tried to include a double spend or some invalid transaction,
The honest nodes would simply reject the block. It wouldn't pass their verification checks. The rules are enforced by the collective agreement of the network nodes.
got it. And then step 6. The nodes signal their acceptance of that winning block by immediately starting work on mining the next block in the sequence. And critically, they use the hash of the block they just accepted as the previous hash reference for the new block they are trying to build.
That's the voting mechanism in action. By building on top of the newly accepted block, they are cementing its place in history and extending the longest chain. This ensures everyone converges on a single, agreed-upon history.
What happens if, just by chance, two miners find a valid nonce at almost the exact same time? The network could get confused, couldn't it?
The paper anticipates this. It's a temporary state called a fork. If two valid blocks, let's call them block A and block B, are found simultaneously and broadcast, some parts of the network might see block A first and start building on it, while others see block B first and build on that.
So you briefly have two competing chains.
For a short time, yes, you get these temporary orphan blocks. But the tie is broken very quickly. As soon as the next proof-of-work solution is found, it will necessarily be found on top of either block A or block B. Whichever chain gets that next block first becomes slightly longer.
On all the honest nodes.
They're programmed to always switch to and work on the longest valid chain they see. So as soon as one chain pulls ahead, even by one block, all the nodes that were working on the shorter chain will abandon it and switch their efforts to the now longer chain. The orphan block on the shorter chain is discarded.
So the network automatically resolves these conflicts and converges back to a single chain.
Exactly. Probabilistically, these forks resolve quickly. The longest chain is always, by definition, the single source of truth.
And one more thing on POW. The difficulty of that puzzle, finding the nonce with enough zeros, isn't fixed, is it?
No, and that's absolutely vital for keeping the system stable. The paper specifies that the proof-of-work difficulty must automatically adjust itself. It's based on how quickly blocks are actually being found. The network protocol includes a mechanism that recalculates the required difficulty every 2016 blocks, which is roughly every 2 weeks. It looks at the average time it took to find the previous 2016 blocks.
And the goal is to keep the average block time at
Around 10 minutes per block. So if, because more powerful mining hardware has come online globally, blocks started being found every, say, 8 minutes on average over the last 2 weeks.
the network automatically makes the puzzle harder for the next 2 weeks. It increases the required number of leading zeros in the hash.
Precisely. And conversely, if blocks were taking 12 minutes on average, the difficulty would decrease slightly. It's a self-regulating feedback loop designed to maintain a predictable block generation rate, regardless of how much total computing power is pointed at the network.
Okay, so this whole intensive, competitive, constantly adjusting proof-of-work system, this provides the core security. It makes tampering incredibly expensive.
Immensely expensive. The paper includes some really interesting probabilistic calculations in Section 11. It shows that for an attacker to successfully modify a past block, like reverse a transaction, they would need to secretly redo the proof of work for that block and all subsequent blocks, and then catch up to and surpass the length of the main honest chain.
Which is growing continuously while they're trying to catch up?
Exactly. The math shows the probability of a slower attacker ever catching up diminishes exponentially with each new block added by the honest network. Even if an attacker somehow controlled, say, 30% of the entire network's hashing power, which is a huge amount, after just 6 more blocks are added to the honest chain, roughly 1 hour.
Their chance of successfully rewriting history drops to almost nothing?
Less than 1%, according to the paper's model. After a few hours, a few dozen blocks, it becomes astronomically unlikely. The network is secure not because tampering is impossible, but because successfully attacking it requires such an overwhelming sustained majority of the global hashing power that it becomes prohibitively expensive and practically infeasible. Economic reality defends the chain.
All right. We've established the peer-to-peer network structure, the public ledger tracking UTXOs, the cryptographic blockchain making history permanent, and the proof-of-work competition ensuring fair consensus on the order of history. It's an incredible technical design.
It really is.
But we now arrive at what might be the ultimate engineering challenge, maybe the most ingenious part. Why? Why would anyone bother? Why would these thousands, now millions of computers all over the world dedicate massive amounts of processing power, burn real-world electricity, invest in specialized hardware, just to validate transactions and secure a cash system for total strangers?
That's the question, isn't it? This distributed system doesn't run on goodwill or altruism. It can't. It has to run on cold, hard, reliable incentive.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, the incentive mechanism is the fuel. It's what transforms this elegant technical blueprint into a viable, self-sustaining economic system.
Absolutely. And the white paper introduces a reward system that is, I think, perhaps the most brilliant piece of game theory within the entire document. It solves multiple problems at once.
Okay, so what exactly is the reward for the miner who wins that computational race and successfully adds the next block to the chain?
By convention, baked into the Bitcoin protocol rules, the very first transaction included in every newly validated block is a special type of transaction. It's called the Coinbase transaction.
Coinbase. Okay, and what's special about it?
Unlike regular transactions that spend existing UTXOs, the Coinbase transaction has no input. It magically starts a new coin. It creates brand new Bitcoin out of thin air and assigns ownership of that new Bitcoin directly to the miner who created the block.
Wow. So when a miner wins the expensive PW competition and gets to add the new page of transactions to the shared ledger, they literally get to print themselves new money, money that didn't exist before.
That's exactly right. Limited, of course, by the protocol's predetermined issuance schedule, which dictates how much new Bitcoin is created per block. But yes, they are rewarded with freshly minted Bitcoin.
And this reward, it serves two critical functions, doesn't it?
Simultaneously, yes. First, and most obviously, it provides the powerful, tangible economic incentive for nodes, miners, to participate. It motivates them to spend the real-world resources, electricity, hardware, bandwidth needed to validate transactions and secure the network through proof of work. They get paid directly for their contribution.
Makes perfect sense. You need to pay the security guards. And the second function.
The second function is equally crucial. It provides a fair, predictable, and decentralized way to initially distribute the coins into circulation. Remember, there's no central bank, no pre-mine, no company issuing the currency.
Right. So how does the money get out there in the first place?
Through this mining process. The Coinbase reward is the initial distribution mechanism. New money only enters the system as a reward for the work done to secure the network. The paper draws an analogy here.
The gold mining analogy.
Exactly. It's analogous to gold miners expending effort and resources, digging, panning, processing, to discover and add new gold into the overall circulating supply. Bitcoin miners expend computational resources to add new Bitcoin to circulation.
Okay, so the primary incentive is the block reward, the new Bitcoin. But the paper mentions another potential source of income for miners too, right?
Yes, transaction fees. The incentive structure isn't solely reliant on the block reward forever.
How do transaction fees work?
When you create a Bitcoin transaction, you're spending one or more UTXOs as inputs. The total value of the outputs you create in that transaction, paying someone, maybe getting some change back to yourself, can be slightly less than the total value of the inputs you consumed.
And the difference?
That difference, the small amount left over, is implicitly claimed by the miner who includes your transaction in their winning block. It's the transaction fee. Users can voluntarily include a small fee to incentivize miners to prioritize their transaction and include it in a block more quickly, especially if the network is busy.
So miners get the block reward plus all the transaction fees from the transactions included in their block.
Correct. And the long-term vision laid out in the paper suggests that this balance will shift over time. The block reward, the amount of new Bitcoin created per block, is programmed to decrease over time. It happens approximately every 4 years in events known as halvings.
We've seen a few of those already.
Indeed. The idea is that once a predetermined maximum number of coins have entered circulation, which we now know is capped at 21 million Bitcoin, the block reward will eventually drop effectively to zero.
And at that point?
The incentive for miners to secure the network will transition entirely to being funded by transaction fees. Users will pay fees to have their transactions processed, and those fees will be the sole reward for miners. The system is designed to become completely inflation-free in the long run, relying only on usage fees.
That's a fascinating long-term design, and it brings us back to the ultimate economic checkmate mentioned in the paper, the incentive for honesty, even for a potentially malicious actor.
Right, the protection against the so-called 51% attack. What happens if a single entity, a greedy attacker, as the paper puts it, could somehow manage to assemble a majority, more than 50% of the entire network's processing power?
They could theoretically overpower the honest network and start rewriting history, right? Double spending their own coins, blocking other people's transactions.
Theoretically, yes. They would have the computational power to outpace the honest chain and potentially force their version of history onto the network. But here's the crucial game theory insight. That attacker faces a fundamental choice.
What's the choice?
They could use their dominant hashing power to attack the system, double spend, disrupt, censor. Or they could simply play by the rules. Use that same overwhelming computing power to honestly mine blocks, collect the massive block rewards, and earn all the legitimate transaction fees.
And the paper argues.
The paper argues, based on rational economic self-interest, that it's always more profitable for that attacker, even a purely greedy one, to use their majority power to generate new, legitimate coins and fees than it is to attack the system.
Why? Why wouldn't they just cheat for maximum short-term gain?
Because successfully attacking the system in a way that becomes obvious, like widespread double spending or censorship, would fundamentally undermine the network's integrity and utility. It would destroy user confidence.
And if user confidence collapses?
The value of the Bitcoin currency itself would plummet, including the value of all the coins the attacker was trying to steal or accumulate through their attack. By attacking the network, they are actively devaluing their own potential loot.
So the very act of achieving enough power to threaten the network makes the health and value of that network incredibly important to the attacker's own bottom line. They become the entity with the most to lose if the system fails.
That's the beautiful, counterintuitive checkmate. The system is designed so that even if someone could amass majority power, their rational self-interest flips. They are incentivized to become the biggest, most powerful defender of the system's rules and integrity, because that's how they maximize their own long-term profit from their massive investment in hashing power.
Wow. The rules literally favor the honest player, even if that player is only motivated by greed.
Exactly. The incentive mechanism doesn't just pay people to participate, it actively aligns their economic incentives with the overall health and security of the network. It sustains the whole decentralized system and enforces all the technical rules through emergent consensus driven by economic rationality, not by appealing to trust or goodwill. #tag conclusion. Well, when you look back at this 9-page paper, it really is incredible. Just how elegantly Satoshi Nakamoto wove together these different concepts to solve a foundational cryptographic and economic problem, one that had really stumped some brilliant minds for decades before.
It truly is remarkable, and it wasn't just one single breakthrough idea, as we've discussed. It was the clever synchronization, the orchestration of 5 key mechanisms, all working together in harmony to create this novel, self-sustaining system.
Maybe we should quickly recap those 5 core ideas one last time, just to crystallize it for everyone.
Good idea. So number 1, a fundamentally new way of thinking about digital money, defined by chains of digital signatures and tracked using the UTXO model. This confirms ownership and the historical flow of value without needing a central account keeper.
2, a publicly announced ledger, shared and maintained across a permissionless peer-to-peer network. This eliminates the need for a trusted central party by giving everyone universal visibility into the transaction history. 3, the blockchain data structure itself, using cryptographic hashes and implicitly Merkle trees to link blocks of transactions together sequentially, making the recorded history tamper-evident and computationally impractical to reverse.
4, the competitive proof-of-work consensus system, using real-world energy expenditure as a voting mechanism, 1 CPU, 1 vote, to allow the decentralized network to agree on the single, correct chronological history in a fair and unbiased way.
And 5, the built-in economic incentive mechanism, using block rewards, newly minted coins, and transaction fees to reliably motivate rational actors to expend the resources necessary to secure the network, thereby aligning their self-interest with the network's overall stability and integrity.
And taken together, this entire system, it created for the first time a way for any 2 willing parties anywhere in the world to transact value directly with each other, instantly and irreversibly, like digital cash, all without needing to trust or even know each other, and crucially without needing permission from any bank, corporation, or government.
That's the core achievement. And the paper really emphasizes the robustness that comes from what it calls the system's unstructured simplicity. Nodes don't need to be identified or authenticated. They can join the network, contribute, leave, and rejoin whenever they want.
And they always know what the true state of the ledger is.
They just need to connect, download the chain with the most cumulative proof of work, the longest chain, and accept that as the proven consensus history. It's robust because it doesn't rely on specific trusted participants.
And ultimately, the system is governed by this constant ongoing process of economic participation. The nodes vote with their CPU power. They express their acceptance of valid blocks simply by choosing to build the next block on top of them, thereby enforcing all the rules and incentives through this emergent consensus.
It's quite profound. This white paper laid out the complete technical and economic blueprint for a permissionless global value system, secured entirely by mathematics and game theory. It was an academic proposal that somehow leaped into reality.
Which leads us perfectly to the next logical question. We've spent this deep dive understanding the intricate mechanics detailed in the blueprint. But how did this theory actually transition into a functioning reality? The paper was published, famously, in October 2008. But the Bitcoin network didn't just magically appear then, did it?
No, it didn't. There was a crucial gap between the publication of the paper and the actual launch of the network software.
Yeah.
In our next deep dive, we'll move beyond the elegant theory of the white paper.
We'll cover the birth of the Bitcoin network itself.
Exactly. We'll look at the release of the first open-source Bitcoin client software in January 2009, the mining of the very first block, the Genesis block, and the historic first-ever Bitcoin transaction recorded on the blockchain.
And I believe there's a rather interesting message embedded in that Genesis block itself.
Indeed there is. A little time-stamped commentary on the times. You definitely won't want to miss exploring how this blueprint became a running system.